Bookworms. This weekend, I went into territory that I have never been before. You see, I read a fiction book that's classed as non-fiction because the story that is so-called made up as fiction could potentially be transcribed as a non-fiction account of what went on. Confused? Hey, bookworms, welcome to the Weekend Readers Book Club, and in this episode we have just finished reading If I Did It by OJ Simpson. So bookworms, If I Did It by OJ Simpson is, as OJ Simpson says in this book, and as it has actually been described in the foreword of the book prior to the main story that OJ wrote, was this is a completely made up story and a fictitious tale of if he did it, how he would do it. And when I say do it or did it, in relation to the OJ Simpson trial for the alleged murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. So I have read the book, I've completed it, and here are my thoughts on OJ Simpson's If I Did It. The OJ part of the book is about 8 or so chapters. The last 3 chapters are the night in question, the interrogation, and him and AC doing a run on, in the car. Now, bits and pieces of this book doesn't sound that fictitious. It sounds like the story he's trying to portray when you read it is, hey, this is my side of the story on what went on, not potentially I've just made this all up in my head. Up until the night in question chapter, I enjoyed the read. It was very enlightening in the sense that, okay, I'm taking it on face value. Yes, it's made up, but the more and more I read into it, it sounds like a actual reenactment or an actual description of potentially what is going on in his head with his relationship between himself and his estranged wife. Now, with that being said, once you hit the night in question, it doesn't really give you any information, because his answer to this fictitious story is, oh, I blackened out. That's literally what he put in the book. And I'm like, come on. If this is a fictitious story, why in the blue hell are you going, oh, I blackened out? At least get your creative, articulate, fictitious story-making juices running wild and give us some plot points to this. There was none of that in relation to the night in question part. While the story was intriguing, the actual act of everything, there was no fictitious story to it. It was just he blackened out. And the rest of the story after that sort of read potentially how you would foresee in the, like, what actually happened. The car chase at the end, the lawyers reading out the letter because they thought, and the police interrogation leading up to it, him flying back, etc. I was disappointed with it, but overall, I was glad that I read it, but it left me wanting to go into a rabbit hole of OJ Simpson more, which is not what I wanted, which I'm not planning to do, but the story itself sort of was like, I wanted to see now how much of this was potentially his argument that he used in the court case in comparison to, hey, this is the fictitious story that I made up in my head and potentially what could have happened if it happened this way. Yeah, I'm on the fence with this book. I liked it. I didn't like it. I found it, just very unimaginative in places, and it sort of blurred the lines a lot between truth and non-truths in relation to taking real life aspects and putting it into a fictitious story more than what it should be. So everything's blurred. So take that with a grain of salt if you choose to read If I Did It by OJ Simpson. Now, this book is a library book. I don't own it. So the question will be, will I be going out to purchase it to put it on my bookshelf? The answer is no. I'm glad I've read it. I wouldn't read it again. If somebody was interested in reading the book of OJ Simpson, I'd say give it a whirl. And I would say you're probably left with a lot more questions and answers at the end of the book than what you were at the start of it, because yes, it is a fictitious fiction story, but it blurs a lot between fiction and non-fiction. So, unfortunately, If I Did It by OJ Simpson, you have not made my bookshelf. But as one book closes, another book has to open. That is a custom here at the Weekend Readers Book Club. So it is now time to find out what the Weekend Readers Book Club, the next read is. And Bookworms, we can confirm the next read is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. Now, this book came up on my radar solely because of the Goodreads 2022 Choice Awards. Nominee for Mystery and Thriller, but also a nominee for Best Debut Novel. So I thought, if you're hitting a nomination in 2 categories on your first novel, I want to read that. So, A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham, you are our next read for the Weekend Readers Book Club. So Bookworms, that was my episode and discussion and review of If I Did It by OJ Simpson, a book that I was intrigued to read, a book that left me having more questions than answers, a book that I felt blurred a lot between fiction and non-fiction, and a book I would recommend, but just I wouldn't go out my way to reread it a second time or buy it. So with that being said, you can feel free to follow us. Feel free to view us on Goodreads and Instagram. We are under Weekend Readers Book Club. In addition, YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts from, we are under The Weekend Readers. Until next time, thank you again for joining us. And Bookworms, happy reading.